Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Conversations at the Edge. I'm Sugata Naidig, Marketing Director at NXP.
And I'm Neil Condell. I head up our connected ecosystems here at NXP, and I'm very excited to be a part of another episode of Making with Matter.
We're back in the Smart Home Innovation Lab with another episode of our first season, Making with Matter. This one's all about baking with Matter, whether that's adding Matter to an existing product you have or deploying a new Matter device.
In this video, Sugata and I are going to cover 4 important steps in bringing a Matter product to market, including planning and development, certification, deployment, and even getting involved in the Matter community.
Okay, so let's dig into this. The first step you talked about was developing your product. And to me, the first thing that comes to my mind in that scenario or for that step is defining your requirements. And I think a lot of people might think about that as just Matter and the connectivity piece. But at NXP, we really like to first focus on what are the requirements for the end device that you're trying to make? What are the use cases you're trying to address? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I mean, definitely there's a lot of things that are going to come after that, including your processing kind of requirements, your architectures, and how everything's going to fit together. All of the requirements from like battery life or whether it's line powered and all those things that come into to the picture. Definitely. I mean, looking at all the use cases up front, definitely the first step.
And whether it needs some kind of a user interface or a display, keypad, whatever kind of processing requirements will help determine what the host is of the architecture, like what's going to run the system, right? And then you start thinking about what are the connectivity requirements. And, sometimes people are like, should I use Wi-Fi? Should I use Thread? But I think it really goes back to what's the role it's going to play in the network within the smart home, and then define the use case and the connectivity to support those use cases.
Yeah, good point. One thing I was thinking about as you were saying that is the fact that when Matter was really launched, was under other names before that, but it kind of, I heard this a lot, but it was like the thought that this is going to bring a kind of a renaissance of new products or more energy into the smart home market was something that was brought up. And I think that's really, I'm seeing that, right? Because all the things you're talking about, we're not just actually just adding and bolting on, the capability of Matter to existing devices. It's really starting to have our customers and people that are playing in this market really start to redefine and re-architect what their products are doing. Because instead of just worrying about the connectivity and all of those kind of low-level requirements, like you said, whether they're Wi-Fi or Thread or Zigbee or Z-Wave or whatever, they're actually looking at, hey, we're going to go with the right use case for the technology for the right use case, and then from there we can actually build a system that actually has value, has focus on usability and things like that. And so I really do think that renaissance of development in this industry is really starting to.
I like the word renaissance. I was always thinking of it as an inflection point, but I love that because also I think companies rethink their strategies. Like you don't necessarily have to build all the components needed in a smart home. You can look and say, what do I want to leverage that could already be in the home, and then focus on specific experiences to deliver with my products. So let's say you build a thermostat. Maybe you don't need to build all the sensors that go with it because you can leverage what's already existing in the smart home.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny that you brought up the thermostat because I was just literally thinking about a conversation we had with a company that's looking to deploy a new thermostat, and they're coming to us and saying, "Hey, we want something that's kind of more essential, kind of has just essential capabilities of acting as a thermostat. Another one that may have a GUI, a more kind of a basic GUI, or another one that has a really rich, UI and we call it HMI capability, and with touchscreen and things like that, and you put capabilities to have that act as like an edge router, like whether it's going to be running Zigbee or Thread, to be able to talk to sensors and things like that. So a lot of different kind of considerations as they look at how do we include all of the requirements for Matter, but now that we have Matter and we can kind of leverage the whole Matter fabric to be able to do what needs to be done as far as sensing and whatnot, maybe that does change how the product does manifest itself, to the end user.
Yeah. So we talked about processing, connectivity, and the other key ingredient is security.
Absolutely.
And I know we'll talk a little bit more when we get into the deployment phase, but even at the requirements phase, you have to understand not just what Matter requires from a security aspect, but what does your application require? Say if it's a security camera or a door lock, there might be higher levels of protection needed, or there could be more vulnerable to higher levels of attacks that you need to plan for a way to mitigate those.
Yeah, I know the common conversation that we've had is how much security is enough. I know when Matter was initially discussed, there was, companies like NXP who put a lot of merit and a lot of focus into security and on-device security, hardware, level security, really pushed to make the Matter security requirements to be, very strong. Others were trying to push it to more of a, hey, we can just do with what's existing and just kind of keep it in software. We're finding that we're seeing more and more of the conversation go into more of, like you said, stronger. And I think in the previous episode, we talked about security as a range, right?
Yes.
And what is good enough and what's maybe too much. Right. But as things continue to evolve, security is becoming more of a care about. More of that hardware-grade security is something that we're hearing more and more requests for. So from secure elements that you could attach to any processor or device, or embedded secure what we call enclaves.
Yes. That's
embedded into the processing. It's definitely very common now to be part of that general conversation there.
I think another thing that we also discuss is about looking at the requirements of what your product or portfolio needs to be able to do. So you also want to think through, for this specific product, how do I want to design the architecture, but then also be able to apply it to other products in your portfolio. So really taking a platform approach on how to build your Matter portfolio, and then looking at the system level and the components with that lens in mind, right?
For sure. I'm just thinking in that vein about security. I know we have customers that they'll buy our secure elements because they can attach that to any system, regardless of where the processor or the radios come from. And that gives them that common kind of interface so that they can make sure they have solid security across all of the systems that they do. In other cases, to your point, when you're looking at systems, we can embed that in there and then make sure that all the requirements are up to the level that they're looking for. But for cost optimization and simplification, looking at it from a system standpoint, that is a factor that is also considered heavily.
Yeah. Same thing with connectivity, very modular approach to that too, whether you pair a radio with a host or have just a single standalone unit that does both the processing and the connectivity.
So one thing that we found has been really popular is our wireless MCUs, and where we have processing, security, hardware security embedded in there, connectivity, and so on, all in a single chip. And that's giving a lot of opportunity to look at new systems or new implementations of how devices will kind of exist in the ecosystem and work together. We talked about this in previous episodes. This one right here is one I couldn't keep going back to that I love, because this can manifest, the single chip of the RW612 can manifest itself in a smart plug, for instance, or a wall switch, and just enable more than just a function of the device, but function of the Matter infrastructure. And I think that's fantastic.
And we scale down to small sensors then with wireless MCUs that are built for low power with Thread or Zigbee support.
And that need that infrastructure, right? And so, and getting it in a very simple way that's very inconspicuous is awesome.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so we've talked about how important it is to do the use case definition, but let's dig into now, okay, how does that help you then select the right platform to develop on? What are the things that you look for there?
So the way that we work with customers and how customers kind of interface with us is sometimes they'll come with an RFI or an RFP of some sort where they're saying, hey, these are our requirements, what are the solutions that you can provide us? And from an NXP standpoint, you mentioned earlier, we really focus on the system level kind of architecture and what we can do, whether it's all NXP parts or a portion of the parts that we could contribute to it, but we look at it from a system level. And we want to be able to get, first of all, something in their hands as quickly as possible so they can start prototyping. And so these boards right here, they're called our Freedom Development Boards, or Rapid Development Board. If you look at it online, it's spelled FRDM. But these are our wireless or connected Freedom Boards. Right here, this one has the W71, so MCX W71 on it. So back to, you were talking about Thread with Bluetooth low energy for commissioning. This is the RW612 Freedom Board, which has the tri-radio capability. And then this one's an interesting one right here, because this is one of our MPUs, so IDMX93 in this case, that actually also has a separate tri-radio chip, but a very powerful microprocessor. And so this gives you an array of capabilities. So you could run FreeRTOS or Zephyr on these two devices right here using our SDK that enables a lot of examples and Matter support and whatnot, to our Linux BSP or even Android that could run on these multi-core processors. And so they can take these, and these are also something that we've really newly relaunched because we needed to have more low-cost platforms to get into the hands of all the developers. So you can get tens or dozens of these into different developers' hands. They can start working on them, innovating, and getting things up to running very quickly. And we've enabled it with something we call the Application Code Hub, which is a ability for these developers to go to nxp.com, go to the Code Hub, get code to be able to run examples, to start prototyping, start playing with it and innovating different use cases.
It's really important for all of the customers we talk to that they need to be able to go back to management or to their teams with the prototype in a very rapid manner. And I think that the breadth of this development capabilities that we're providing on the Freedom boards, from tri-radio to low narrowband wireless MCU to our MPUs and MCUs, really equips manufacturers and developers with all of the ingredients and kitchen tools, let's say, to build what they need to build, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I like that. The tools, the ingredients are all coming together. And one thing I love about working for NXP is the potential of opportunity to solve problems, do really cool things, innovate. There's just so many different things. And we haven't even talked about some of the other exciting technologies like ultra-wideband and some of the sensing capabilities and NFC, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. But there's just so many different pieces you can really make that fusion of innovation and fun things. Yeah.
Agree. So one aspect is picking the right development platform, but really what we see as software is a huge part of the effort required to bring a product to market. And so maybe we can talk a little bit now about SDK and how we support our Matter with our SDK that complements these tools we just talked about.
Love that topic because I think it's a super important one. So we talked about the Freedom boards, being able to prototype and play with it. One thing, the Application Code Hub that we've mentioned before, so they can bring out examples and start to learn how to play with Matter and evaluate. Fantastic. But to your point, where do they go from there to be able to actually productize the software and everything needed for Matter? So on our SDK, which supports Zephyr or FreeRTOS, and for our microcontrollers and whatnot, we've enabled Matter and brought that into the SDK with our toolset using VS Code, for instance, as the IDE there. And we downstream from the Matter GitHub, right? That's organized. It's managed by the Alliance, right? The Connectivity Standards Alliance. So we take that source, we'll downstream it, and then make sure that it's enabled and ready to go to be able to run on our platform. So any kernel patches or anything like that need to go in place to be able to run all of the aspects that for the use cases that want to be implemented, whether it be a thread border router, thread, even having Zigbee coexist and Wi-Fi and so on. All of the things that need to be done are all going to be incorporated into that SDK, and so that development experience is very straightforward.
And we've tested it, we validate it on these hardware platforms, so our customers don't need to go through that effort of the porting and does this work properly. They can dig straight into their application development.
Absolutely. And when you do that, we're always working and enhancing the code in the SDK. We release that at least quarterly. So it's always being released. So when something's out there and available, it could be, if a product's already in the market, they could do a secure OTA or over-the-air update. We also do the same thing for our Android and our Linux BSP. And so, in a separate GitHub where we use the Octo Linux and whatnot, which is very, optimized for enabling for production. All the same things happen on those OSs as well, and which I think is a very important aspect. And one of the things that I think a lot of our customers have really appreciated from all the years that they've worked with NXP is just that enablement. Same thing with the quarterly update and whatnot. But Matter is right there. It's integrated, it's pre-tested, and ready to go, so that there's a lot of that difficulty of making sure everything is compatible with the operating environment is taken care of.
Making it seamless. Okay, so hardware, software, now comes a very crucial step that many companies struggle to navigate is certification. And certification is a really critical component also because this is what helps standards work in real life to ensure that they're really delivering on that interoperability between different devices But the process can also be pretty complex, especially with Matter, because Matter uses existing technologies like Wi-Fi and Thread and Bluetooth, and so there's different layers of certification involved. So what can we do to provide developers with a way to understand and navigate that process better?
Good question, and please chime in because there's a lot of different components and aspects to this, as you mentioned. First of all, certification is for a number of people that are starting to embrace Matter is different because at the application level, they've never had to really certify a product. Either they just make sure that they work within the ecosystem that they've been curating and these devices from this manufacturer can work with these devices and they'll need to do a works with program or something like that. But this is different. This is actually certifying device that says, hey, I'm a Matter device and I will work with any other Matter device in the ecosystem. And to your point earlier, without that certification, interoperability cannot be assured.
Right.
And it's got to be a very disciplined program, which does come with some complexities and some challenges. So you mentioned about the transport certification. So the Wi-Fi certification or Thread, if that's part of the system, Bluetooth Low Energy or Bluetooth certification all need to be provided, and that's part of the application process. And you have to attest that, hey, these have gone through certification, and these are the IDs and whatnot, because we want to make sure that it's a good user experience for everybody. And regardless of whether you're the ecosystem controller, the Matter controller, or the end device, we're all in it together, right? All these devices have to be able to integrate.
Definitely.
Right?
But then we look to improve the developer experience because some of these certifications, as a silicon company, we go through these certifications on our chips, doing the Thread certification. I'm going to give that as an example. And then companies can leverage our Thread certification without having to go through the testing process and the test labs themselves, which saves a significant amount of time and money to be able to get their product further along that certification process. Yeah,
definitely an important point. And we've gone through for instance, in our chips, and I suspect this is pretty much becoming common elsewhere, is in any certification, like you said, Thread or Wi-Fi, that we can do on our chips and then provide that to our customers so they can inherit that certification, use that as part of their application is really critical. So that is something that's a burden that we're taking on as a silicon provider to help. And mentioned this before, but we are really, taking that same benefit and listening to customer feedback. We really want to drive that same inheritance concept into Matter. And so we've been actively trying to work with other companies to be able to put something like that in place. And hopefully it'll be out in the near future. So be able to basically have a certified Matter platform, for instance, that could just be inherited by an end device manufacturer, and they only have to do any kind of Delta specific kind of testing to their application from there. And I think that'll be really, really important to be able to open up, that progress.
It's also important to note that this is all about facilitating and easing the process, but it doesn't mean that our certification, another product developer doesn't have to get a product certified. They can inherit our certification, but they still have to get their product certified. It just means they don't have to go through the test lab. It can be more of a paper application. But one of the things I think that people forget is certification also gives companies the rights to use the IP that's been contributed to the standard by however many different companies in the industry, right? And so it's a really important piece that you're using this standard that's got IP in it and you're not having to pay any royalties on it, but you do need to get certification.
100%. Very, very important point because we want to make sure that, yes, you're covered there, the product can be accepted into the fold. One other thing that we'll talk about a little bit in commissioning later, any product that's actually certified with Matter is the ID is then entered onto basically a blockchain ledger.
That's right.
That's serviced by and maintained by the Alliance. And so any Matter fabric will only allow a certified device to be able to be brought onto the fabric. So that trust of any device that's coming on is significant because then that device will operate in a manner that they expect. And back to your point about the platform kind of approach and the inheritance approach, that's absolutely important. But we can only, as a platform provider from NXP, we can only take it so far. We're not thermostat companies. We're not sensor companies and whatnot. And so that thermostat behavior, the sensor behavior, does have to be tested with the test labs and gone through the test harnesses and working with that the Alliance provides to make sure that the behavior is exactly as expected so that when a temperature sensor integrates or connects to a thermostat, for instance, even if they're from different companies, they know exactly how to talk and interact with each other.
Yeah. So now let's talk about the next step in the process here. So you've defined your use cases, picked your platform, development platform, prototyping, gone through certification. The next stage that I think sometimes gets undervalued is the deployment aspect. How are you going to, now that you have it certified, how do you deploy it into the market? And there's a couple of factors I'm thinking of here that we can dig into. One is you talked about the works with programs. So to be able to work within the different platform smart home ecosystems, there are sometimes some testing that's involved there about driving real life interoperability. And then you also touched on a second concept that Matter requires security. And part of that process is this device attestation certificate that has to be embedded in every device that ships. And the purpose of that is to guarantee that the device is what it says it is or who it is, and to guarantee that it is a Matter certified device. And that's a key, like we talked about in the certification step, important for that interoperability. But these are sometimes steps that aren't well understood and they take time, and then how you deploy it to market. So are there any tips or things that you can insight to provide on this part of the process?
I hit a lot of things there. That's good. We'll start with the DAC, as we call it, the Device Attestation Certificate. So this is a certificate that needs to be injected into secure storage on any device out there, and it can be done on the chip. When it's batch, when it comes from the silicon supplier, they could, companies like ourselves, NXP we've been blessed, so to speak, by the Alliance to be able to provide that service. It's called a PAA, or Product Attestation Authority capability. Let me just mention the reason that we did it. We didn't initially start providing this PAA certificate and authority service, but we did it at the request of our customers because it was like you said, it was a new step. It was confusing. They didn't know how to navigate it, and it was quite expensive by in the offerings that are for those third parties that just do that as part of their normal offerings and whatnot. And so we did it just because we wanted to make it as affordable as possible, because this is a new step. It's a new cost for the device that they haven't had to incur in the past. And we wanted just to make it straightforward. And so whether
operationally it makes it streamlined.
And NXP already had the infrastructure because we are one of the main players in mobile wallets, mobile passports, all of that operational infrastructure that's running 24/7 to maintain the security secrets and certificates. That we had that. And so we're like, you know what, let's offer it to our customers. And it's been well received. Yeah. The one thing that's unique about NXP is we can offer it to our customers that are running our silicon or somebody else's silicon. Right. It doesn't matter. We can do both. And so that's not commonly understood.
I think it also helps enable really scaling Matter beyond the big consumer brand companies that maybe people are very much aware of, who might have that kind of infrastructure built in. But think about innovation from startup companies that wouldn't have that kind of infrastructure, and then having to navigate dealing with another third-party supplier. This way they can enter the market for building Matter devices with a lower overhead cost and more streamlined approach.
No, I think that's a super good point there. One of the things that you kind of mentioned there is relying on a partner that can help them streamline things. We do have customers that are looking at devices that they already have out in the field today, and they want to make them Matter devices, or customers that are building, are kind of converting devices that are already in process or developing new devices. There's different aspects that they need to consider, but this DAC, this certificate to injection, is a really important aspect. And so you need to have a service, kind of like what we offer with our EdgeLock to Go is the name of it, where you can inject it either, like I said, during our manufacturing into the chip itself. So they're delivered chips that have these certificates already inserted into them, or we could do it remotely at their manufacturing facility, or for the products that are already out in the field today, we could actually even do it in the field, right? We could inject them, remotely that way. A lot of flexibility, and whatever the use case is needed. But yeah, so there's some services that allows them to be independent outside of having to rely on the big platforms, which they offer some great things, but there's some flexibility that comes with that, and really, not every home is going to implement their Matter, environments the same, right?
And the other thing I talked about was the interoperability with the smart home platforms. So here in our innovation lab, smart home innovation lab, we don't necessarily do interoperability testing, but we take our platforms and we're putting them in real life environments to really test out, like, as the smart home network scales, is there anything that breaks? And then the Works With programs for the major ecosystem companies also do some testing, but now they're starting to leverage CSA's interoperability labs so that it reduces the number of steps a device maker has to go through.
Yeah, this is a new kind of development, which is really going to be key. And I like that you brought that up, because the fact that what we've heard from a lot of the big box stores, from our partners that are running these platforms or ecosystems like the Googles and the Apples of the world, is they still want to have that labeling, that Works With labeling on the box, so that people know that when they buy something that it will work with those ecosystems. Because as many of us know, there's a number of statistics that show that a lot of smart home devices in the past were returned back to the stores unopened.
Unopened, yeah.
More than half. The statistics were quite surprising, and so those Works With labels are still important. But with that lab, available to all of the devices that have been certified with Matter, those can be provided to the lab, and then there's testing that's happening there. And these larger platform ecosystems like the Googles of the world and whatnot will accept that as meeting their requirements for the Works With program, which I think is really excellent.
Yeah. So the last step in our process here is about how to get and why to get more involved with the Matter community. I know you and I definitely are passionate about this. We're very involved in Connectivity Standards Alliance, Thread Group, Wi-Fi Alliance, Bluetooth SIG, and the community that we engage with helps us understand the market requirements and deliver to those requirements better. But what are some other things and benefits that we like to articulate around what people can get for their companies by getting more involved in the Matter community?
Good question. I'm just thinking, as you were saying that, I was thinking about the fact that we have customers from other markets, whether they be, building control or even automotive, like connected car and whatnot. How can they leverage what's working well with Matter? The open source, the certification, the collaboration, and just this community that's come together with all the different device makers, with the infrastructure and the platform makers and so on. I mean, that it's definitely really changed the way things are approached now from a standards incorporation and collaboration in the market. And so we do get these customers that come forward and want to develop a new device type, like whether it be an audio device that you could have actually smart home control, more broadly available in all the different different user interfaces, whether it be speakers or your phones or whatnot, but across manufacturer.
Appliances is another example.
Yeah.
The appliance industry has been struggling with bringing value to consumers to connect their appliances, right? And now, as they're starting to integrate Matter into the appliance, it's not so much about a connected appliance, it's about the intelligent home.
Yeah, definitely. And not just connecting the appliance just for the sake of connecting it, but bringing value to why that appliance is connected. So one thing that we didn't talk about earlier that's part of developing the Matter device and whatnot is commissioning, provisioning, onboarding, all those, those steps that go within it are a key piece that needs to be successful, because people want to have a good experience, bringing their device up.
It needs to be easy.
It needs to be easy, and it needs to be worthwhile, reliable. Right? Reliable and everything. And so Matter does have has a standard commissioning flow, which is very good, because then you're going to have it provides a more common flow for that consumers will be used to doing it. There's some ability to customize it as well for the specific device or use case and whatnot. But right now, Bluetooth Low Energy has been the one that's, the option that has been required, or the standard option, let's just say, to be able to do that device-to-device commissioning. And so, for instance, when you bring up device, you want to connect it to your phone, Bluetooth Low Energy is the connection option. One of the things that we've been working on within NXP is, what are the other options that could actually help with that? So we've been working on, we have been a long time provider of NFC technology. It's in your phones, it's in, so many other different things. But
I think people are even more used to NFC now, because I don't know about you, but I don't carry cash anymore. I tap and touch at every store to pay for things. So I think it's just more ubiquitous as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And so when we talk about, hey, what if we did a different approach and used NFC to do a tap-in commission, right? That would be I don't know, the Holy Grail or something amazing that's in just something as simple as taking your speaker and tapping it to your access point, or your phone tapping to one of these devices and having that just easily brought up. So that's the kind of things that we're trying to invest in at NXP to say if we could bring that to Matter, bring that to other ecosystems and other standards. And same thing with Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi has been the traditional way of doing commissioning, and like your inkjet printers and things like that. Not always the best experience, especially because you have to go and sometimes configure and point your phone to a different access point just to be able to connect to it. And it just didn't have the infrastructure there. But some of the things that we've been doing, working with membership and whatnot within Matter, within the Wi-Fi Alliance and others, to make Wi-Fi actually a lot easier to do it. More like the Bluetooth capability of where you're just pairing two different devices without having to worry about access points or anything like that. They connect to each other, they share the credentials and whatnot. And so having things like these different technologies available to make that process easier and give options to our customers that are developing devices is something that's actually garnered a lot of attention. And I think that's going to be something that as we bring those guys, all of these folks into the discussion, bringing into the Matter community, that's where a lot of this change can happen.
Yeah, and I think in the past, sometimes companies feel like the standards are really driven by silicon companies. And I think Matter has really changed that. And we are able to bring a lot of value to CSA because we work with thousands of customers, right? So we're able to bring this market knowledge from different areas and back into it. But there's also so much value for product developers and product managers, engineers, product managers alike, to get involved in how the work is being done because it's all complex, right? And every situation, use case can bring different perspectives into the development of the standard and maintaining and continuing to evolve the standard. And I think you and I have both seen companies that were not traditionally part of something like Connectivity Standards Alliance get involved and actually start leading some of the efforts to ensure that what gets deployed is really meeting the use cases and the real life scenarios.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen, I can tell you so many of examples of partnerships where we've worked with appliance companies or energy companies or even automotive companies to talk about different device types and use cases, to how could we help them, go through the process, learn the process of defining a device type and how to take that through the whole process of getting the code enabled in the SDK. It's fantastic. And one thing that we've enjoyed is the demos that we're able to show at the member meetings. Like that's not something that used to exist, but we bring the demos of the new implementations of some of the new kind of technologies that are kind of under wraps in the spec.
The under wraps, yes. Yeah. You get to see things while they're being developed and not the final end polished look, right?
So device makers will love it. Platform companies were providing, implementations of the technologies, or we'll go to device makers and partner with them and say, hey, let's do something like this with NFC, or we'll do something like that, with Wi-Fi and just show a different use case and show how the actual specifications could, start to look and operate.
Right. And I think we've spent a lot of time, covered a lot of great ground here. I think the final thing I would say about being part of the Matter community is the networking, how much you can learn from others in the community, how many connections you can make. And from a sort of selfish perspective, but a realistic perspective, it builds these business relationships and drives all of us to be able to increase our impact in the industry.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's more of an abundant thinking and, a take on just growing the pie, right? We're all working on it together and really enjoying the time together. And I've learned a lot. I do love the associations and all the things I've learned, and just the collaborations have been incredible.
Yep. All right. Thank you. So thank you for joining us today with this conversation at the Edge. Neil, it's been a great time. We have a lot more we can talk about, so please stay tuned and join us for our next Making with Matter episode, where we'll continue this conversation at the Edge with a focus on energy management.
And don't forget to subscribe. Smash that like button.